and we're super excited. I see so many familiar faces on here that have been with us for a lot of these master classes. So thank you so much for being with us again. And I hope you all got your kits and that that you guys are ready for some great whiskey tasting and a good cocktail as well. So just a few things before I hand it over to Austin. If you wouldn't mind, please keeping yourselves muted throughout the event tonight. It just helps us with all the background noise and things like that. So as Austin's speaking, people can hear him versus all the background noise. If Austin wants to like converse, that's totally fine, but just wait for him to give you the green light to be able to unmute yourselves. If not, then please put everything in the chat just to the side, and he will answer that throughout the night as well. And also just a quick thank you to Davidson's Beer, Wine, and Spirits. Like always, they have been a huge community partner for us, and we couldn't do it without them. And also a huge thank you to Austin and for having him tonight and him donating his time to do this. So with that, I will go ahead and get us started. Welcome to our first ever virtual Burns night, and I'll go ahead and hand it over to Austin.
Hi, everybody. My name is Austin Ponton. I am going to be here with you guys today. I am from Bruichladdich Distillery, so we're going to be doing a little bit of a Burns Night celebration digitally tonight. For some of you guys who don't know about Burns Night, don't worry. We're going to talk a little bit about what it actually is, and we're going to be tasting quite a bit of whiskey. So as Danielle said, just to kind of keep everything flowing, let's keep ourselves muted. There are going to be a couple of times where I'm going to ask you to unmute, and that's when we'll kind of open it up to let everybody kind of jump in and tell me what we're going to be talking about. So I am going to share my screen here again. Let's see if we can't make this work. All right, hopefully everybody can see that. Maybe. It's never a digital event without a little bit of technical difficulty, so here we try again. All right. So I've always found that it is a lot easier to listen to me talk if you have a cocktail in your hands. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to start off with the cocktail, get that one going. And so we're going to create this. I'm going to kind of walk you through it. Super simple. Don't take a drink yet. We'll all toast, and I'm going to make sure that everybody's kind of, and I'll kind of let you know why we wait on that one. So for this, you're going to need a pint glass if you have one. Your ginger ale, about a half a lime, and the Port Charlotte Tenure, which of your 5 vials, it should be the one vial that does not have a sticker on it. So it's more full than the rest. That's the one that we're going to be starting with. So we're going to start off. Take your glass, add ice to it. Once you got that, we're going to build this cocktail directly into the glass. So I'm going to tilt my screen down here and let you see what I'm doing. Now, you don't have to do this. I'm measuring it out. Your guys are already pre-measured. So just go ahead and take that whiskey and dump it right into the glass with all your ice in it. Give everybody a second. Next thing you're going to want to do, you're going to want to take your ginger ale and you're going to want to add that. Once you got in there, leave that a little bit there at the top for your half a lime to get squeezed right on in. You can do that right now. And once that's in there, take a spoon and stir it all up. All right. Now, the reason I asked you not to take a drink yet is part of the Burns Night tradition is to make a toast before you drink each drink. It's actually 7 years of bad luck, more specifically bad luck in the bedroom if you drink without toasting. So nobody wants that, I'm sure. So I'm gonna do a toast, and then I'm gonna salute with the Scottish salute, which is Solange va. Feel free if you want to say that with me. That's the fun part. So everybody, if you want to raise a glass, may we get what we want, may we get what we need, and may we never get what we deserve. Solange va. All right. Now, let's see here. Now I'm going to shoot this back to Danielle. Danielle has a little bit to talk about this gentleman right here for you.
So what would a Burns night be without some bagpipes? So while you guys start sipping on your cocktail, we are going to just kick it off with some music from actual one of our local bagpipers who's actually on the call tonight. His name is Randy Arndt, and this is him performing Amazing Grace just to get us in the mood and get us in that Scotland vibe. So we will go ahead and start with that. We had the awesome chance to go up to Daniels Park and film him up there in such a beautiful setting. So I hope you guys enjoy. Thank you so much, Randy. We really appreciate that. We will definitely, I saw someone in the chat say if they can get the contact information on him. So I will, tomorrow when I send an email with the coupon again and everything, I'll add his contact info in there so you guys can have that as well. And also one thing I forgot to mention earlier on when I welcomed everybody, so real quick, we were very fortunate to have it was someone with Rack USA who works with the Glencairn glassware company. He reached out to me. He's actually local to Highlands Ranch. So he actually donated 2 of these Glencairn tasting glass sets. I don't know if you guys can see that. It's very cool. It has like a little wooden block and 3 Glencairn glasses. So he donated 2 of those. So what we're going to do is do I can't think of the word. A trivia, that's the word I was looking for. A trivia at the end of the event. So pay attention to Austin's, all of his history and everything like that. And then the first 2 people that answer at the end of the night will then get the 2 sets of these. So These are actually super cool. They're retail valued at $108. So it's a super awesome gift that he was able to donate to us. So thank you to him. And we're super excited to be able to send 2 of these home with somebody. Now back to Austin.
All right, nice. So yes, we are going to have 2 trivia questions. The first people to get them right will get those amazing little Glencairn glass kits, which will really help you continue to drink some Bruichladdich going forward. So I'm going to go ahead and reshare again. We're going to go right back into our masterclass here, maybe. Okay, so while we've got this cocktail going, we'll get a little bit of information about Robbie Burns, Burns Night, kind of what it is, why we're doing this today of all days on a Monday. So this is actually Robert Burns' birthday. For those of you who don't know, he is widely regarded as the national poet of Scotland. Lots of poems that you may or may not already know are from him. They are very famous poems, and he is recognized the world over for his overall themes of love and nature. He is in fact so famous that there are over 60 statues dedicated to Robert Burns, which makes it the 3rd most statues of a non-religious figure. He's only coming in after Christopher Columbus and Queen Victoria, so he is kind of a big deal. Burns Night / Burns Supper, kind of depending on who you hear and where it comes from, they mean the same thing. And it is a national holiday to celebrate his life. In 1801, his friends got together after he passed, and this was kind of a way to remember him and celebrate his work and really kind of honor him. And it included dishes of haggis, which unfortunately we don't have tonight. Digital events kind of goof that up, but if you are eating haggis, you are a hardcore Burns Nighter. I'm all for it. And recitals of some of his best loved work, which is wrought with a heavy Scottish accent. I am not Scottish, if you can't tell, but I have actually got a couple of people from our distillery there in Bruichladdich in Isla to do a couple of readings of some poems. So we'll have some poems scattered in. We'll have some more bagpiping music from Randy, and we'll have a little bit more information. In addition to, we're going to be going through 4 samplings of Bruichladdich whiskeys and kind of have an open forum when it comes to those. So with no further ado, maybe here we go.
Hello everybody, and a happy Burns Night to you from us all here on Isla. My name is Raymond Tibbs. I'm a brand ambassador for Bruichladdich, and I'm sitting just outside the distillery just now, and I'm going to recite to you There Was a Lad by Robbie Burns. There was a lad was born in Kyle, but one a day or one a style. I doubt it's hardly worth the while to be say nice with Robin. Robin was a roving boy, rantin' roving, rantin' roving. Robin was a roving boy, rantin', roving, Robin. Leaves me on thy curly pow, bonny Davy, dainty Davy. Leaves me on thy curly pow, thou see I my dainty Davy. Our monarch's hinmost year but ane was 25 days begun. 'Twas then a blast o' Januar wind blew Hansel in on Robin. The gossip keekit on his loof, who squaw while lives, 'twill see the proof. This wally boy will nae be coof, I think we'll ca' him Robin. He'll hae misfortunes great and sma, but aye a heart aboon them a'. He'll be a credit till us a', we'll be proud a call him Robin. Be sure as 3 and 3 makes 9, I see that Aika score a line. This chap will dearly like our kin, so leaves me on thee Robin. Good faith, quo squaw, I doubt you stir, you'll gar the lasses lie a spar, but 20 thoughts ye may be war, so blessings on thee Robin.
Okay, my video started back up. Hopefully that came through clear. As you can see, that's why I passed off the nice role of reading that, because I would have butchered that horribly. The word that I do know that's Scottish is right here in front of you, Bruichladdich. So that is how you say that mouthful of a word. And you're looking at the beautiful distillery there on Isla. Next. This is a nice little aerial view that we've got going. And the name Bruichladdich is poetically translated as a brae by the shore or hill by the sea. So the entire distillery is actually on a hill, and it is gravity fed all the way down to the water that you're seeing there, and that's actually Lockendall. So there's water everywhere, all around Isla. Isla is a very small island off of the southwest coast of Scotland. It is home to now 9 very large or fairly large distilleries. I know a lot of you have heard of a lot of them. Ardbeg, Ardnahoe is actually a brand new one. Bunnahabhain, Bruichladdich, Lagavulin, Lefroy, Kilchoman, all of those are, and Kalila, all of those are Isla distilleries. So I know we've heard of them before, but now hopefully we can kind of get you a little bit more of a idea of the island. So here is a photo of our distillery in 1881. That's when we were originally opened. It was 3 brothers, the Harvey brothers. Robert, who was an engineer, John was a distiller, and William was the businessman. So when they built this distillery, they had a little bit of extra money, and that very much helped them create a modernistic, very, very modern for the time in the Victorian era distillery. So we have very tall swim neck stills, all of this, they had this idea in their head and they finally put it out here on paper. All of this was built revolutionary. It's stuck around since 1881. There's a lot of the equipment we still use today is the same equipment that they put in the distillery in 1881. In 1994, we were closed for the 4th time over the history. So from 1881 to 1994, we've been closed 4 separate times. That's really only important in the fact that that means we never really got the influx of cash that a lot of distilleries got to have so that they could update. And so we were stuck with utilizing what we had. And that kind of worked out for us because in 2001, they were purchased by 2 individuals called Simon Coughlin and Mark Rainier. These two gentlemen were wine merchants who purchased the distillery to create whiskey the way that they felt whiskey ought to be. Because they kind of came in as local owners, they didn't have anything to really answer to. They could kind of do things the way they wanted, and they were wine merchants, so they had access to a lot of casks, but they weren't distillers. So they brought in this gentleman on the left. That's Jim Mckeon, for those of you who have heard of him. Those of you who won't, he was the former head distiller at Bowmore Distillery and commonly known as the godfather of Scotch whiskey. The individual right here in the middle is Duncan Mcgilvray. He was our distillery manager. Actually, they credit him with a lot of the fact that we were still able to be running. That man could fix anything with a roll of duct tape. It was impressive. And then on the right is Duncan Budgie McFadden. He is actually still our he is still working on our, he's still our safe man. So he works on the still and watches the spirit safe. And he is the longest employed person from on the distillery. So I think he's over 30 years. This is what the distillery looked like when they purchased it in 2001. We reopened for production on in May of 2001. And it was the start of a new era with Jim Mckeon at the helm. So kind of touching again on that untouched Victorian equipment, unmechanized. What you're seeing here is what they lovingly call their computer. in the distillery. There are no computers in the distillery. This is what they use. And it's kind of interesting because if one of those pieces of equipment breaks, there's only like 3 people in the world that can actually create the parts to fix them. So if something goes down, it's down for a while. So, but it kind of gives us this unique flavor and this unique feel on the spirit that we wouldn't get if we did not have this Victorian equipment. A lot of distilleries can be run with 2 people. That's not the case with Bruichladdich. In fact, every single person that you're seeing in all of these photos are employed by Bruichladdich. These are all Isla individuals that live and work on Isla, and we are the largest private employer on the island. The only person or the only company, we're going to throw up air quotes on that one, that employs more people is actually the government. So we employ over 100 people. And a lot of that is because we're 100% conceived, distilled, and matured and bottled on Isla, which is a rarity of it in itself. A lot of all you have to do to call yourself an Isla whiskey is distill on the island of Isla. So we believe that terroir matters. Terroir is a very French word, and we're going to talk a lot more about that as we get to some of these whiskeys. So now the individual that you see on the right, the younger gentleman, that's Adam Hannon. He joined the distillery in 2004 as a tour guide, and then really started to learn the ropes under Jim Mckeon. And as of 2000 and I want to say 15, Adam took over, maybe 2017. Adam took over as our head distiller. So now all of the whiskeys that are getting put out into the market are Adam Hannon's brainchild. And he learned everything he knows about master distilling. He actually does not like the word master distiller, so that's why he calls himself the head distiller. He learned everything he knows from Jim Mckeon. So the style was kept very consistent in how we're putting things out. This is just a nice little callback. So Remy Cointreau purchased the distillery in 2012. That's actually who I'm employed by, is Remy Cointreau. So if you've heard of Remy Martin or Cointreau, that's our big family group. And what you're seeing here is actually the Feis Eel Festival. Happens every year except for this year and this past year due to COVID. However, it is a amazing whiskey festival where every distillery puts forth their own unique festival release. It's amazing. If you ever get a chance to go, I'd highly, highly recommend it. So our one distillery creates 3 distinct single malts. We are going to taste through 2 of the families today, and we'll talk a little bit about the last one, and we'll kind of open it up if you have questions. But we do an unpeated, which is our Bruichladdich. Then we do a heavily peated, which is our Port Charlotte. And then we do a super heavily peated, which is Octomore. Jim, I am actually blanking on when that festival is because it's been so long since I've actually held it. I will actually get you an answer as soon as I can look it up real quick because I don't want to tell you something wrong. Dan, Ardnahoe is still a while out. I believe they had to, there you go, May. That actually is correct. As soon as I saw it, I was like, man, that's right. Ardnahoe is still a way out from bottling, Dan. The reason that we have kind of close ties to Ardnahoe is Jim Mckeon retired and immediately went over to Ardnahoe to start distilling and help them open up another distillery. So I'm very excited for when they're actually going to start bottling and sending stuff out. All right. Okay. So this is our flagship product. So I'm going to have everybody grab a glass. If you have a Glencairn, that's what I would recommend. If you don't, some sort of tulip glass, wine glass, something like that would work. If you don't have that, a rocks glass will do just fine. So, and if you don't have a Glencairn glass, really pay attention to what I'm saying, so maybe you can win one of those things. So we're going to start with the classic Lottie. So that is going to be your vial that has this nice bright blue label on it. You should have an ounce of each whiskey. I wouldn't recommend drinking all 4 ounces over the next hour of our conversation. So I would say take about a half of each vial as we get to them and pour that into your glass. And it's really kind of important to save that other half so that you can revisit it after you've kind of let your palate open up and really kind of experience it. So let's take a little bit of that whiskey, and we're not going to drink it, but we're going to add it into our glass. And we're going to talk a little bit about just the basics of whiskey tasting. I have a funny feeling we have a pretty advanced crowd on the call, and that is a-okay. It never hurts to kind of go over some basics again. So I'll give everybody kind of a minute to get their glasses and everything. And while people are grabbing glasses, we'll talk a little bit more about the whiskey, and then we'll get into tasting it. So you're going to see this transparency. You're going to hear us talking about transparency quite a bit. Transparency is something that doesn't happen very often within the Scotch industry. It's kind of a secretive, like, why would I tell you what I'm doing type thing, type industry. We believe you ought to know what's in your whiskey. And we believe that it's our right to tell you what we put in our whiskey, because we, again, believe that terroir matters. You do not have our stills, you do not have our water, you do not have our location. So you could have our exact same recipe and try to recreate it out here in Colorado or in a different part of Scotland, and you will not create the same type of whiskey. So we are totally okay with sharing you everything we have. So much so to the color of the bottle that everybody sees, right? So color is really important, not just the color of the bottle, which is this beautiful teal, almost Tiffany blue color that's meant to represent the color of the Atlantic Ocean on the one sunny day a year when you're flying into Isla. You know, I thought this was kind of a marketing shtick when I first heard it, and then I got the pleasure of going out to Isla and flying in on a sunny day, and the color is an exact match. So I got to give them props for that. Somebody really nailed that. So when we're talking about color, we're talking about color of whiskey as well. So one of the first things you do when you've got your whiskey in your glass, because I feel like we should have a lot of time now to get everybody here, is hold it up to the light and take a look at the actual color. Kind of light, straw colored. We do all of our whiskey as non-chill filtered and coloring free. So a lot of people will comment on how light this particular whiskey is, or how dark another type of whiskey is. Single malt Scottish whiskey allows the use of E150, which is a caramel coloring. The only reason that this could potentially be an issue is it can make something that is super young look super dark and kind of fool your eye into thinking that you have something that's much older than it is. So we don't do any coloring. We blend for consistent coloring as well as taste. So just takes a little bit longer and a little bit more of a finite style to get down. But we're pretty proud of what we've done. So I hope nobody's taken a drink yet, because we have not toasted. So first thing you're going to want to do is smell your whiskey. After you look at it, smell it. Part your lips, stick your nose close to the rim. Try not to swirl it. Everybody kind of tries to swirl it because that comes from wine drinking. You don't want to do that. That's going to release alcohol vapors right up into your nose. You don't want to do that. So try not to bury your nose in your glass either. Just kind of set it off to the side a little bit, right above it. Breathe through your nose and your mouth at the same time. That's really going to kind of help to pass those flavors over your taste buds, so you can actually smell or taste what you're smelling. And now here's the fun time where you guys all get to kind of unmute. Let me know what you're smelling, if something smells particularly amazing, if you're like, wow, I don't exactly know what I should be smelling.
I smell some brown.
Some what now?
Brown sugar.
Brown sugar. It's a good one. Well,
Just want to add, I smell some maple to it.
ooh, a little bit of maple. Okay, so you kind of got that sweetness going on, even on the nose.
Yeah, it's like a flapjacks, a
Ooh,
little bit, kind of smell.
I'm getting a little vanilla. I'm getting a little vanilla in there.
I'm seeing in the chat apple, some pear, a little bit of light sugar. All of these are great notes that you're getting, and we haven't even tasted it yet.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
as a way to continue on with tradition, so that we can actually get some whiskey in our mouths here, let's go ahead and we're going to toast, and then we're going to take a little bitty sip of what we have in our glass, kind of let it hang out in your mouth. We're going to give ourselves a Chattanooga chew here. That's going to prepare our palates for the fact that we're going to be drinking straight whiskey, and then kind of hold it in as long as you can. And then when you swallow it, then we're going to kind of talk a little bit more, and then we'll come back and revisit it here in about a minute or so. So here's our toast. Here's to lying, stealing, cheating, and drinking. If you must lie, lie in the arms of the one you love. If you must steal, steal a kiss. If you must cheat, cheat death. And if you must drink, drink with us. Salam Java. So that first drink is going to be really warm. So kind of let your palate kind of get used to that for a minute. We'll talk a little bit more about the transparency that we do, and then we'll come right back and we'll smell it again, and we'll kind of see what everybody changes. Jesse, yes, you can add just a splash of water. That will kind of help to open it up a little bit as well. And this whiskey, and in fact, all four whiskeys we're going to be tasting today are 100 proof. So they're 50% alcohol. So they can handle a little bit of water coming into them.
That's warming me up on the way down.
All right. So this is kind of a crazy scientific looking slide, and I don't want you to get overwhelmed. But this is part of our transparency project that we talk about. On every bottle of Bruichladdich, we have a code, and it is really hard to see because it is just like tiny black letters on the bottom. But there is a 19 on this one / 3 digits. That is our transparency code. If you actually go to bruichladdich.com, click on the classic Laddie, and plug in the code from your bottle, there's a little area called transparency code. You plug that code in, and it will tell you everything about all the liquid that went into your bottle. So we're seeing a little bit here. On the left is the number of casks that were put in. So, I mean, we're talking sometimes up to 100 casks that we are adding or that we are blending together to create this singular bottle of whiskey, right? In the on the next row over is the actual vintage, so the year that it was distilled. The next row over is where we sourced our barley from. So we are 100% Scottish source barley at our distillery. We do not use any other barley other than Scottish grown barley. We have that ability because we're smaller. Some of the big boys don't get to be so choosy, so they have to go commodity source market, and a lot of your commodity barley growers are Czech Republic, Russia, and the United States. So again, terroir matters. If you're getting barley from Russia, is it really going to taste like Scottish barley? Most likely not. You get very unique flavors that come out of your terroir, and we're going to experience terroir in barley right after this, Jim. So bear with me, and I'll have a very obvious answer for you on that one. And then on the last row, before we move on, those are the types of casks that we are aging these in. So you're seeing a lot of sherry casks, some bourbon casks that are then aged in Spanish sherry butts. More bourbon, you got some, it's a little smaller, but Ribera casks, and then some Rivesalta casks. Again, these original owners were wine merchants. So they had access because they had all of these nice friends in the wine industry. They could get these incredible wine casks to bring in and age whiskey in. So you might think, wow, those are some super bougie, super fancy casks just for a flagship whiskey. But that's what gives us our flavor. We don't mess around. Okay, so now that we have kind of let it open up and we've let our palates kind of get accustomed to the whiskey, let's go back to it. Let's see if we smell anything different. Let's see if we taste anything different. Is it a little smoother the second time around, a little easier to take that second drink? It only gets easier as the night goes on too. So we're in for a really good night. A little bit of spice on the end, absolutely. Does it have kind of like a grainy kind of taste, like almost kind of like bready? Does anybody kind of get any of that? You guys have already said a lot of the green fruits were mentioned. Brown sugar was mentioned right off the bat. Steve hit that one on the head as soon as he came in. And some sweet malt, that malted barley that is really kind of super sweet bread for me, which is amazing. So again, this is a mixture of American French oak casks, 100% Scottish barley, and a multi-vintage cuvee. So that's why you don't see a year on this bottle. We're not going to slap an 8-year or a 10-year or whatever on that. The youngest spirit in this bottle needs to be whatever that age is. So if I have a 10-year whiskey, the youngest whiskey in that whiskey or in that bottle is 10 years. I cannot have anything younger than that legally. So we didn't want to put ourselves into a box on, okay, well, this 6-year-old whiskey was amazing, but we can't put it in here because this is an 8. We didn't want to do that. So that's a big reason why we don't put an age statement on there. Another one is age is a statement of age, not necessarily a statement of quality. So you really kind of run the risk. The best whiskey I've ever had in my life was a 21-year-old whiskey, and the worst whiskey I ever had in my life was a 21-year-old whiskey. Typically, you're looking at about a 6 to 8 to 10-year age range on the whiskeys. Each one is different, and each one, if you plug in the code in the back, will tell you exactly the age of all of the youngest whiskey in that bottle. Okay. So we're going to continue to kind of sip on this as we talk a little bit about why we believe barley matters. So you see this nice little beautiful sign here that says growing for Bruichladdich. In 2003, we as a distillery decided that we want to have as much local influence as we possibly can. So we started going around to farmers on the island and said, hey, would you grow barley for us? We promise we'll buy it from you at X price or whatever, whatever their stipulations were. The biggest issue was that barley hasn't been grown on Isla since the 1960s. It wasn't super efficient to grow, and the industry got modernized, and the farmers just said, okay, we're going to move on to something else. So a lot of these farmers, their grandparents didn't even farm barley. So we kind of had to work with them to figure out the new ways to grow barley and make it efficient and profitable for the farmer. And we brought in experts to figure out soil composition, what types of barley are actually going to grow better. And we believe that matters because it's the main ingredient in single malt Scotch whiskey, malted barley. So continuing with the everything 100% Scottish barley, we wanted to do an Isla Barley variant of every whiskey that we make. So while Isla is part of Scotland, yes, It is a very unique terroir. In fact, on two different sides of the island, you have an Atlantic-facing side, and then you have the inward-facing side that faces towards the mainland Scotland. Those two sides are going to produce very different types of even weather and wind, and all of that terroir is really impacting things on that side of the island, including barley. So here's a nice little photo of all of our farmers. We really owe a lot of what we do to these individuals. So we work with 17 farmers and 18 different farms, last I checked, on the island. And in fact, all of the barley that we use in the distillery, 42% of it ends up coming from Isla. It is not easy to grow, as it's strong winds and heavy rain. So these individuals are hardy. That's a nice way, I think, to put that. They don't give up, and they go out there and bust their rear ends just to create something for us to drink in the long run. And I think they know that as well, because I'm sure they get their fair amount of whiskey from Bruichladdich made from farms that they grew their barley on. So this is a nice little beautiful showcasing where a beautiful map showcasing where all of our current farms are. One of these is out of date. I'm trying to figure out where it's at. It went to Kilhoman, actually purchased the farm when they purchased the distillery there, and they're a little almost farm to table. I hate to really kind of use that way, but they are a very niche. They make everything there in-house. They're in their own farm. So another fantastic whiskey. So what we've got here is our next whiskey. So if you still have a little bit of the Bruichladdich left, that's okay. If you want to grab a different glass, pour it into a separate glass and keep using your Glencairn. If you want to chug the last half ounce or the last of the half ounce, it's all up to you. Nobody's driving, so we're okay on that side. And we're going to move right on into the Isla Barley Varietal. And that should be a kind of light gray label. It should say Bruichladdich on it. The other one should say Port Charlotte on it. So there should be hopefully enough of a differentiation. If you want to rinse out your glass in between, that won't hurt it. And again, we're going to smell this a little bit before we toast. And feel free to, as you're smelling it, unmute yourself and let me know what you're getting here. So this is actually 6 different farms that we got to our Isla Barley from on this one. The farms kind of get mixed together when we go to the malting floor because the yields aren't high enough for our maltster beds to allow just a whole floor for one farm. So they kind of get mixed together as all Isla Barley varietals. They don't get mixed with any mainland Scotland. So we're working on a way to do that, and we'll talk about a little bit more as we go on. But what are we smelling in this new varietal? Does this smell like the exact same whiskey that you just had?
It's a little harsher.
A little harsher. Does it smell saltier to anybody? Like brinier?
I'd say it's a really strong smell, really. I think a scent of really, really sweet, like sugary kind of taste, like similar to like a pixie stick a little bit. So it's a very, very sweet smell.
I'm getting apple right off the bat.
Like green apple. Like kind of like that Granny Smith apple sourness almost.
I actually think it smells a little smoother than the last one.
Well, let's get it toasted so that everybody can taste it and see if it's smoother or harsher.
Might be a hint of cinnamon there too.
All right. Are we ready? Here's to a long life and a merry one, a quick death and an easy one, a pretty girl and an honest one, a good whiskey and another one. Salangeva. David, other Isla brewers go through a commodity sourced barley, as far as I know. So that's kind of random depending on what varietal they're going for that year. But a good bulk of barley does come out of Scotland, but you can't get all of your barley from Scotland if you're producing on a major scale. And we're talking major scales like Mckeon scale type thing. There we go. Dawn likes this one. So sugary, salty apples. There you go. Kind of like a salty caramel apple to me. I get that just a little hint of caramel. So for me, these are brinier, almost nuttier. You kind of get a little bit of like cashew, like salted cashew a little bit on there. So for this particular varietal, this was 100% Isla grown barley, about 3/4 first fill American whiskey cask, 10% first fill River Salts wine cask, and 15% second and third fill Austrian and Sauterne sweet wine cask. Vatted together or married for 6 months before bottling. So again, we're not just saying, hey, we got a bunch of ex-bourbon barrels, let's slap them all together. There is an art involved in this. And I just love to taste the fruits of their labor. 100 proof again, and this one is 6 years old. So it was distilled in 2011. I believe it was bottled in like 2018 or 2017 late. So if you ask most distillers where they get their barley from, they'll say it doesn't matter. Barley doesn't have an impact. Barley doesn't have that much of a reason for your flavor. That's why a lot of them will say, it's all about the oak. It's all about the oak. While oak does speak to your older whiskeys, which the longer it spends on oak, the more that influence is going to have, your younger whiskeys are going to speak of the grain. So whiskeys that aren't 10 years old are going to have a lot more of that impact and flavor coming from your actual malt, which is why, does anybody feel like they just had the same whiskey twice? Because if you ask most of the distillers, they say where you get your barley from matters, and this is the exact same recipe. So this ought to have been the same tasting whiskey. Does anybody feel that? Love it. Love it. So we're going to continue enjoying this one. We'll talk a little bit more about kind of the future of Bruichladdich, where we're going, why I was talking about malt floors, and why we think everything should be done on Isla. There we go. So this is the future of Isla Barley for Bruichladdich Distillery. So as of 2023, I'm assuming nothing has really been that delayed due to COVID. It could be, I'm not sure. We plan to have our own malt floor on the island near the distillery. This is huge for us because this is going to open up the opportunity to malt single farms rather than having to have everything kind of combined together. to meet the minimum tonnage requirement from our maltster. This is going to kind of open us up to this unique opportunity to create a lot more specific, unique, maybe Atlantic side or mainland side of island type whiskeys, which then you can really start to drill down and experience the terroir that comes from just a couple miles down the road, the main differences that you're going to see. We're also creating, I think, like 10 more massive warehouses we're building on the island. And I have a picture a little later of what the couple of them already built look like. This is, again, just so that we can continue. Currently, we age all of our product on Isla. That is helping to enable us to continue doing that as we scale up and our popularity grows. So we don't want to preach this now and then not be able to continue it later if we grew. So we're trying to prepare for that. We also bought some land right next to our still house, and it's 30 acres that we have used for test plots. So we're actually testing different types of varietals of barley growing there, and they're in little like 3 foot by 2 foot or 6 foot squares, excuse me, that you plant and you test to see which ones thrive in Isla soil and which ones just don't produce that well. So again, this is just another way that we're kind of trying to do what we can to help Isla farmers produce a very flavorful barley, but also barley that is going to produce a lot of tonnage for them so that they can get paid more. The long and short of it, we want to be able to pay these farmers more, and we want a better flavored barley coming out of the whole deal. So it kind of works out for both parties. And the farmers don't have to take on the financial burden of testing, setting a whole side of their land apart to test to see which barley grows better. And again, we are trying to continue 100% maturation on Isla. We actually have over 200 different cask types that we have in our warehouses there at Bruichladdich. These are all things that we have to call on when we're blending, we're doing any type of unique special type of releases. And a lot of that come from Mark and Simon's previous life in the wine industry. I have a lot of casks that we have agreements that we won't tell you that we're not allowed to tell you where they actually were, what kind of wine they had in them, anything like that. So we can just say, like French red wine, but our contract doesn't let you tell you who. Dan, I don't believe we do any single barrels. The last time that Bruichladdich sold a single barrel was, I think, 2008. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that when we opened, we were trying to do everything we could to pay the bills, keep the lights on. And we purchased about 6,000 casks when we purchased the distillery. It came with about 6,000 casks. So we sold a couple of those. We sold a couple of the spirits that we were like, okay, you choose what cask you want it to go into. So you might run across somebody occasionally who says, yes, I own a cask at Bruichladdich. They kind of took a risk because they bought it when Bruichladdich was early on. They didn't know kind of what the situation was going to be. A lot of it, we actually have single barrel Octomores, which we'll talk about Octomore here in a little bit. But for those of you who know, that is a crazy thing to have. There's a group of German individuals that own a Octomore cask that come back each year on the cask's birthday to taste it. But we do not sell any single casks anymore. David, are we planning to enter the 15 to 20 plus aged Scotch market? We have 20 plus aged Scotch out there already. It's called Bruichladdich Black Art. The current release, I think, is 24 years old. It is amazing. And I will talk a little bit more about that at the end, because I think I have a slide in here for it. Let's see here. Dan, can I buy one? So, Adam Hannon, nice, wonderful quote here from him. There's no rules, only instinct to follow. It's a whiskey I love to create. So we don't put him in a box. We let him go out into the rack houses and he tastes everything. His job is to go to all of these different casks and taste the whiskey, get tasting notes, figure out what that would go really well with and how to blend it together. And we just kind of let him create. The only things that we tell him he has to have a consistent flavor on are Bruichladdich, the classic Lottie, and Port Charlotte Tenure. Those are our flagships. Everything else, he can just kind of go wild and crazy and create everything that he wants. Clinton, there's no peat in the 2011. Anything that says Bruichladdich on the bottle is a unpeated whiskey, sans one whiskey that they put out. I think it's Rocks. You will be hard pressed to find that one out in the market anymore, but it's out there. That one was a peated whiskey. So that is the only exception. If it says Bruichladdich on it, it is unpeated whiskey. And we'll talk a little bit for those of you who don't know about what peated is when we get to the Port Charlotte. So here's this nice little photo of two of our new rack houses that we're building as part of being a part of Remy Cointreau. We get to have access to a little bit more funding than we had before. So rather than update the distillery, which we didn't want to do, we decided to add rack houses to be able to continue to age everything on Isla. Funding is very important. That's how we are here today, what we're doing. So we come up with this nice little beautiful thing called We Are Isla. Again, every photo you're going to see on this presentation are individuals who work for the distillery. I know they all look like models, but they are actual people making the liquid that we are going to be enjoying. So before we get to the Port Charlotte, I have another poem for you from another
Up in the morning early, Robert Burns. Cold blows the wind frae east to west. The drift is driving sairly. They say loud and shrills, I hear the blast. I'm sure it's winter fairly. Up in the mornings, no for me. Up in the morning early. When a' the hills are covered with snow, I'm sure it's winter fairly. The birds sit chittering in the thorn, a day they fare but sparely, and langs the night frae e'en to morn, I'm sure it's winter fairly. Up in the mornings, no for me, up in the morning early, when a' the hills are covered with snow, I'm sure it's winter fairly. Slanjiva. Up.
All right. So a lot of y'all have been asking about peated whiskey. Is there peat in it? What are we getting into? So now we're going to move on to Port Charlotte Tenure. So that is the one that says a little 10 on the tiny little label. I know they are super small labels. I apologize. They're hard for me to see. And the first thing you're going to get on this one is, I'm betting, a little bit of smoke. So, peated whiskey is a very unique type of whiskey that is, Isla is known for their heavily peated whiskeys. That's kind of what Isla's called to claim to fame is. So, part of the distillation process and part of what you do with barley, when you harvest barley, you throw it out on a malt floor, 4-6 inches deep, and you wet it down. So part of that process is to actually start germination of the barley seed. That's going to turn the starch in the seed into sugars, so that the seed can then eat up those sugars to grow its plant. We don't want the seed to eat up its sugars. We want to use those sugars for distillation. So we need to stop that process once it is converted the starch into sugars. So the way you stop that is you dry the seeds out. You put them on a grate, and then underneath it, you burn a fire. So Isla is not, they do not have a whole lot of trees on Isla. So what they used to burn to heat their homes was actually peat moss. Peat moss is decayed plant matter over millions of years. And if left alone, it can turn into coal. And there's a certain thing called sphagnum moss. If anybody's super nerdy, that's what has to grow over what your peat is, so that you actually know that that's what it is. It's sphagnum moss. And they dig it out of the ground, and it comes out looking like mud. And they set it out, it dries out, and then they burn it. They burn that to keep their houses warm. So that's what they decided to burn underneath their barley when they needed to dry it out. That it produces a very smoky burn, that all that smoke then rises up through the barley grains, and the phenols of that actually attach to the barley grains, and that flavor, that smoky flavor, persists all the way throughout distillation. It's measured in something called phenolic parts per million, or ppm. And typically, the higher that ppm is, the smokier the flavor of that barley is going to be. Most distilleries, including Bruichladdich, use the method HPLC, and it's done by a third party. So we send off our barley after it's been peated, and send it off to a third party to test it. And that's where we come back with where our barley ppm is. So for Port Charlotte, it is actually 40 ppm. So we should have a little bit in front of us. What do we smell? Vanilla and honey.
Austin, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Is it the one with the lighter one or the darker one?
So one should have a yellow 10 on it, like the 10.
The one that says 10.
The 10, thank you.
Yep, you're good.
Yeah, 12. Campfire, a little bit of.
I heard a little bit of campfire, and I think I accidentally muted it. I hit a button. So I heard a little bit of campfire. David, yes, we'll talk a little bit more about the highest phenolic Scotch. Almost like a wet campfire, Jamie. That's a good one.
Getting a very smoky kind of smell. A very, very smoky smell, like hint of charcoal for sure.
So like barbecue smoke almost.
Yes, something like that.
Okay. All right, so we're going to toast, and then we can get to drinking this here.
I just thought I'd say there's also some salt in there.
A little bit of salt, yeah, a little bit. All right. This is actually a quote from Mark Twain. I like this one. Too much of anything is bad, but too much good whiskey is barely enough. Frangeva. So we talked about this a little bit already. The definition of an Isla whiskey is Isla distilled. So you can distill your spirit at your distillery on Isla, pump it into trucks, put that on a ferry that over the mainland, put it into casks there on the mainland, and age it for its life there on the mainland. Then bottle it, cut it with water from the mainland, and ship it out and still call it an Isla whiskey. Bruichladdich is very different. We obviously do everything distilled, matured, using the water and bottled there on Isla. Also, 42% of all the Isla, or all the barley we get, is grown on Isla. And then that nice little coming soon, we've already talked about the Isla malted. So we're all about trying to be as Isla-centric as possible, because we believe that terroir matters. Again, terroir, there's that word. And it it really has an impact on the product that you put out. And we're very proud about the products that we put out. This bottle right here, this Port Charlotte Tenure, is actually a little bit of a unique change of pace for us. When Adam Hannon took over, we had a lot of product built up that was able, so that we were able to put out a Tenure. A lot of people who are obsessed with age, 10 years on the very bottom of where they would, what they would consider, buying, 10, 12, 15, 21. Age limits kind of came from a marketing thing. Scotch whiskey was not doing very good in the 80s. And one of the big boys, I don't know who exactly, brought in a marketing person, and they were walking them through the distillery and through the warehouse. And they were telling them, hey, okay, over here, there's 10-year-old whiskey. Over here, there's 18-year-old. Over here, there's 21-year-old. And the marketing person said, so the 21 is better than the 18, and the 18 is better than the 10. And the distiller said, no, there's 10-year, there's 18-year, there's 21-year. And the marketing person said, well, you're not listening to what I'm saying. The 21-year is better than the 18-year. The 18 is better than the 10-year. And that's kind of what brought Scotch out of its kind of slump. Individuals like myself pushed that narrative for 35 years, and that age is the best thing, older is better. And now it's kind of biting a lot of them in the foot. They don't have the product set aside to be able to continue selling older stuff. They know that age doesn't necessarily matter to be able to put out a fantastic whiskey. So now a lot of the bigger distilleries are moving away from that. And part of kind of the challenge to that conversation is Adam Hannon decided to come in and say, okay, the youngest that you guys are willing to drink, I'll put that on there. We have enough stocks that we can actually put a permanent 10-year-old whiskey out now. And that means that every bottle that we have, the youngest whiskey in there is 10 years old. And you're also going to see that on this bottle, we're also 100 proof, and it's 40 parts per million. So this is very heavily peated. Part of what makes this whiskey so smooth and so easy to drink is the balance that our really tall stills, long neck stills, with a heavy peat creates. So one of the best ways that I have found to describe Port Charlotte is a late onset peat. So when you really kind of start to taste the whiskey, you get this kind of bright, floral, almost fruity whiskey right at the front. And then it kind of starts to heat up a little bit because it's 100 proof. And then by the time it hits the back of your palate, that's when the smoke comes in and kind of washes away that heat. So it's a late onset peat, which means you really get to enjoy the full aspect of the whiskey. And then the peat kind of comes in almost as an afterthought. Most peated whiskeys are pow, right up in front. They're going to kind of take over everything with the peat. That's not what we wanted to go for. And our tall, long neck stills really kind of help us balance out this flavor. Age doesn't matter unless you're a cheese. Very nice. So here's a little bit of the notes on the Port Charlotte Tenure. 100% Scottish barley, as always. 65% of it's first fill American whiskey casks, 10% second fill American whiskey casks, and then the last quarter is second fill French wine casks. That kind of barbecue smokiness. Somebody said charcoal. That's a really good comparison. But this is still just this very rich, almost spicy whiskey. But again, you still get this nice, sweet, floral flavor going on. And this whiskey came out May of 2018. And then before the end of the year, we were actually voted number 4 best new whiskey of 2018 from Whiskey Advocate. That is like the highest rated whiskey to come off of Isla in 10 years or something like that. Phenomenal review. It's an amazing whiskey. It has quickly kind of become iconic. So you're asking why did they rebrand the bottle? So a lot of the way the old bottle looked was very similar to this. In fact, it was the same bottle shape and everything. And if you kind of look around on whiskey shelves, you'll see a lot of whiskey comes in bottles shaped like this. And it kind of got lost on the shelf. So part of redoing the spirit and kind of making it bigger, bolder, a little bit more complex than previous, they wanted to put it in a new glass to really differentiate it. And then that's where they kind of brought in this nice green, sharper edges to really kind of differentiate this. It's got raised lettering on the back for when the next time you pick up a bottle. And it's just, I love what they've done. And especially when you get a bottle and you start to pour, you'll realize that they designed the lip to actually stop drips, which is amazing. It was all just kind of part of differentiating from the product that we had in the market before, which was Port Charlotte heavily peated Isla single malt whiskey. That's kind of, you'll see some of that out and about still in some of the places that have it. I can only think of one in the state, and I don't even know if he's still got any. And it's really just kind of a way to kind of make it a little sexier, a little bit more appealing, and differentiate from what we had before. Somebody knows the distillery, the Botanist. Yes, so the Botanist is a gin made by the same distillery, has raised lettering on the bottle. It's the Latin of all of the botanicals that they use in it. If you like gin and you like this whiskey, I would highly, highly recommend picking up a bottle of Botanist as well. It is incredible, like the best gin I've ever had. So, continuing on, again, we have this already authentic Isla single malt. We're doing more on the island than any other distillery is that's out and about. Kilchoman is an exception. So we really want to explore this influence of Isla Barley on this heavily peated whiskey. And then gratuitous shot of farmer with his cow. Because we do think that the community is a big part of how we're able to create these flavors and this unique story that we really get to tell. And I put these in here because Isla is freaking beautiful, even in black and white. And you get to see some of these absolutely stunning photos of farmers in their fields tending to the product that we now are drinking. So we're going to move on to the final of the 4 whiskeys that we're going to sip tonight. Do we have any questions so far that I've missed? I've tried to stay on top of the chat, but I'm sure I have missed something. If not, okay. We are going to move on to the last whiskey that you have. It should be Port Charlotte Isla Barley 2012. Jim, I have only been once. I would have been back in August for a yearly refresher, but obviously COVID's the excuse for everything, unfortunately. I'm hoping to get a chance to go back again in August if things open back up again. I tried to move there. The wife said no. So tiny little island. It's 3,000 people and 30,000 sheep. And I cannot exaggerate that. It is, there are more sheep than people on the island. The funniest thing is that the farmers spray paint their sheep with their color. They'll just hit them with the color of their farm. And there's no like fencing laws. So the sheep are allowed to graze wherever they want on the entire island. And you'll wake up in the morning, walk outside, and there's a sheep eating the grass right out of your front yard. It is hilarious. But the island is gorgeous. The people are so nice. If anybody ever makes this trip to Scotland, it is worth the extra $150 flight to bounce over to Isla and come back after a day or two. I'd highly, highly recommend it. Absolutely beautiful place. beast with a ton of history. Okay, as we're moving on to our final whiskey. If we get caught up, I've been talking too much. Do we smell something different on this one versus the others? Does it smell the same? Does it have any similarities to anything else that we've had tonight? So it smells a little less peaty to, that just went away, Clinton. Some citrus honey, Karen says. More sea salt. Some faint cherry. Okay, there you go. So far getting a little bit of the influence of the number 3, the Tenure. Yeah. Light caramel. I catch a lot of notes from the Bruichladdich Isla Barley because, again, you're going to get that huge Isla Barley influence. So we'll do our final toast so that everybody can get to enjoying this and tell me how much, tell me which one ends up being their favorite. So, all right, here we go. Here's to the people who love us, the losers who've lost us, and the lucky ones yet to meet us. Solange. What do we think on that one? Winner. So this one, again, this is 100% Isla Barley. This is going to be from, and I'm gonna butcher these, but I'm gonna try it. Dunlasset, Sunderland, Cruach, Starch Mill, Rockside, Island Farm, Cool, and Mullindry. So those are the farms that we get on there. And actually, somebody hit the nail on the head in here. I'm going to say Catriona. I'm sure I'm butchering that, and I apologize. Creamy is probably one of the best descriptors that I have found for the difference between Isla Barley and non-Isla Barley. So the Isla Barley varietals just tend to be a creamier whiskey. Just very smooth, a little sweeter with that kind of that salt influence, that brininess, but just an overall just incredibly enjoyable whiskey. This is 3/4 first fill bourbon cask and the last quarter second fill wine cask. This one happens to be 7 years old, so the difference between the two, again, same style recipe and everything, but Port Charlotte Tenure is obviously going to be 10 years, and this one happens to be 7. So again, you can still have the conversation, but there is about a 3-year age difference. 40 parts per million, 100 proof, so still 50%. And then you kind of bring in the vanilla and milk chocolate and a little bit of like black pepper and definitely smoke flavors going on in this one. So we have a lot of ex-wine casks that we use for Port Charlotte specifically. So for those of you who really like this peated whiskey and are really kind of looking for something unique, we come out with rare releases, and I'm going to say rare because Colorado did not get very much. The current release that we're dealing with right now is OLC. So it's Port Charlotte OLC, and then it's like a :01. I know Davidson's has some on their shelf. I just saw it. I'm actually surprised it's still there. That is part of like our experimental cast series type thing. We do something different. MRC was our previous release. OLC, this is an Oloroso sherry cask, aged Port Charlotte. So that that sherry cask has such a pronounced influence on this heavily peated spirit that Adam decided that this was something that he needed to set aside and bottle separately and put out as its own unique release. It's something that I would heavily recommend getting. I grabbed 3 bottles myself because I know that once they're gone, we won't be making them again. The next release will be something different, something more unique, different than what we have. So if you're a huge fan of Port Charlotte like I am, I'd recommend checking that one out. David, yeah, the biggest difference between number 2 and the number 4 is peat. Dan, we'll work on getting you a black art. PC10 versus PC Isla Barley for Steve here. The biggest difference is, again, where you are getting your barley from. So PC10 happens to be a 10-year-old whiskey versus a 7-year-old on the Isla Barley. But again, the significant difference is going to be that it's mainland barley versus Isla Barley. Dan, you're reading my mind. You're jumping right to where we're talking. So Dan wants to know the parts per million count on Octomore. So we're going to talk very briefly about Octomore because we don't have a taste on it. Some of you guys were able to join us for our limited editions masterclass where we got to taste that there. That was a truly unique and special thing that HRCA did for us. So that was a lot of fun. So just as a kind of a reminder, Port Charlotte is 40 parts per million. So Octomore, the most heavily peated single malt spirit in the world. We got together with Baird's, which is our maltster up in the Highlands region of Scotland. So we went there, Jim Mckeon went there in 2002, and because he wants to know a little bit more about, how we get to our 40 parts per million, how are they constantly providing us with this consistent peated malt, because it's not a science, right? You're burning something underneath it and it happens to stick to it, right? So they asked them, they said, okay, how do you always get us 40 parts per million? And they said, well, we peat the barley to as high as we can get it. Then we ship that off to get tested. They send it back to us and they tell us whatever it is. And then we cut that with unpeated barley to get to that 40 parts per million. So Jim goes, well, what do you do with that uncut, heavily peated barley? They said, well, you don't want that. He goes, yes, I do. So the first run of Octomore came off the still in 2002. It was 80 parts per million. So that is the baseline of what can be considered Octomore. Anything below 80 parts per million won't be Octomore. So it has to be 80 or above. We do an experimental part of that series, and we'll have a little breakdown of that as well. But the name comes from Octomore Farms, which Octomore actually means the big eighth. The farm that was they're broken down into 8 different parcels. There's an individual that we're very close with. James Brown is actually the godfather of soil, as they like to call him. He owns Octomore Farm. He has been a very close partner of ours since the beginning. So this was kind of a nice little callback to him as a good partner. And all of the water that we use for the distillery actually comes from Octomore Spring, which is on his property. So that's where the name Octomore came from. That's what the name Octomore means. And what you're seeing here is actually peat. This is peat, and you can see where this nice little ridge is that they have dug the peat out from, and they're letting it dry over here on the side. It looks just like mud. So we've been told that this is the whiskey that should not work. It's too peated. It's too young, because typically we're looking at about a 5-year age range. And it is too high in ABV because we are very near cask strength in every release that we put out. So we do, on average, 4 releases a year. For the last, I don't know, let's say 4 years, we've done 4. And then before that, it was a couple releases. And we break that down in the point system, almost like we're in IT. So we are on the 11th series. The 11.1, which is all the way over here on the left, this is our 100% Scottish barley. The 11.2 is our global travel retail exclusive. You won't get to find that anywhere else other than a duty-free when you are out and about traveling. The number 3 is our Isla Barley varietal. Again, everything we do, we like to do an Isla Barley varietal of. And then the 0.4 kind of flip-flops between a virgin oak casking or a Tenure. So we kind of flip-flop. This year happens to be a Tenure. Before we get into it, Steve, we do 50% because that's where it tastes the best. And Todd and Megan, yes, there are a lot of Octomore available at Davidson's. Davidson's is like the best partner that we have ever. They're amazing, and they have Octomore on their shelves quite a bit. The Scotch that won single malt of the year is the number 4 best single malt of the year. Dan, was Port Charlotte Tenure. Jim, that's a good question. So the deeper that you get on peat, the different flavors that you get. Peat, I get asked this quite a bit, actually, and you kind of are alluding to it, but not really asking it, is it's not a renewable resource, right? So this is something that is millions of years old. This is something that could potentially eventually run out, right? So at our current usage of peat as a world, just the peat on Isla will last us for 100,000 years. So that is how much peat there is on the island of Isla alone. And that is not the only place in the world that has peat. Absolutely just a coincidence that Octomore Farm and 80, the 80 floor seem to match. Good correlation there, coincidence though. We've got people talking about buying stuff. We love it. Okay. All right. So we're going to break down the Octomores, and then we're going to get into a little bit more of some questions. So the 11.1, which was our 100% Scottish grown barley, is the control. This is the one that we do the same every year. This is 5 years old, first fill ex-American whiskey cask. This one happened to come out at 139.6 parts per million, which, coming from our 40 parts per million, that's a little bit of a bump. If you like the 40 parts per million, you will love Octomore. That is all there is to it. I have never met anybody that I have tasted on Port Charlotte that said, oh my gosh, that's amazing, that then tasted Octomore after that. That wasn't also like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. It is a ridiculous product that they are able to come out with because of their stills. And again, we're bottling this at 59.4%. So that is our Scottish barley varietal. And everybody who's been paying attention knows that the next varietal that we come out with is a Isla Barley version of this same thing. So this is 100% Isla Barley. This one just happens to come from a single field at Octomore Farm. So I like to call this our Octomore squared, or our Octomore of Octomore. This is single farm barley. This is 5 years old, full term first American oak cask. This one actually came out at 194 parts per million, bottled at 61.7% ABV. So again, there's a pretty significant difference from 139 to 194. And a lot of that is because peating doesn't really have this finite science to it. It could be the kid who stoked the fire had too much coffee that day and was too vigorous with smoking the fire, and it didn't smoke as much because he kept the flame going. There's literally no real explanation as to how they're getting this up as high as they can and why there's such a varying difference between it. We're just now getting scientists studying peat because they've never really studied peat before. That you get different flavors from different regions of the country. You know, Isla peat tends to have this medicinal quality to it, this kind of like iodine and Band-Aids flavor that everybody kind of, you know. We use peat from the Highlands region of Scotland. It's got, which if you've ever seen pictures or ever been there, it is like heather everywhere, all over. So you get that really like heathery kind of peat to it. It's really unique and cool. And that's why, you know, even just between the two areas, the peat has a very different flavor. Lagavulin tends to be, I think Lagavulin 16 is like 38 parts per million. I think Ardbeg goes up to like 45-ish area. Eric's saying 35. You are basically, with those big boys, you're anywhere from 35 to like 48 is your range of peat. So for the last one that we did, this is our tenure versus our virgin oak casking that we do flip-flop every year. This was 100% Scottish barley, first fill ex-American whiskey, and second fill ex-American whiskey, and then we also got some virgin oak in there. This is 10 years old, 208 parts per million, 54.3%. And this is actually the fourth tenure that we have put out. We hold the record currently for the most heavily peated single malt whiskey. Does anybody want to take a guess and drop it in the chat? This isn't the trivia question because I haven't gone over this, but does anybody want to take a guess about what the ppm was when we set the record for the most highest heavily peated single malt whiskey in the world? Somebody said the 6.3, which is 258 parts per million. We are higher than that. Clinton, higher than 300. So lower, James. All right, now we're getting crazy. So it was Octomore 8.3, and it was 309.1 parts per million. So it was a very significantly higher than pretty much anything we've ever put out. We're talking 100 ppm higher than what we've got here on the screen. Insane. And I will tell you, it is incredible. Absolutely incredible. And I'm just going to go ahead and give you a heads up. Davidson's can't get any. Nobody can get any anymore. So I'm going to save Davidson's that headache. That's 3 years old, 4 years old now almost. And that has been sold out pretty much since the day it hit the shelves. So you might find some on a secondary market. I never recommend secondary market. It's a freaking racket. But you might get lucky and find some in a somewhere. But we'll save Davidson's the the headache of telling you they don't have the 8, but they have 10s and they have 11s as of right now. So if you are super interested, or if you have the Octomore and you want to get some more, that's where I would go. So this is kind of just a breakdown as the introduction to the distillery. We have unpeated and peated. Anything with the word Bruichladdich on it, that's unpeated. So your classic Lottie, your Isla Barley. Now, what we didn't talk about was organic and bare barley. Davidson's will occasionally have those on stock, depending on when we can get them some. Organic is 100% organic barley. Bare barley is a unique 6-row barley that is the oldest varietal of barley grown in Scotland. It's over 1,000 years old. It produces a very, very flavorful whiskey. The nose kind of hits you and you think, oh my gosh, this isn't going to be enjoyable. And then you drink the whiskey and you're like, oh my gosh, I have no idea where I thought that wasn't going to be enjoyable. That is insane. that also won like a top 5 whiskey of this most recent year. So that is a huge, huge thing. Black Art, Dan has asked me several times about Black Art. That is our 24-year-old. This current release happens to be 24-year-old. That is the one whiskey we don't tell you everything about. There is the one thing that they like to keep close to chest. We're talking down here in the bottom left corner for those of you who might have got lost there. It tends to be about $400 to $450 on the shelf, depending on the release. But it is typically some sort of wine casking that it has spent a very long portion of its life in that type of cask. But that is about all we know. The only person who knows the makeup of what's in that bottle is Adam Hannon. Then we have our rare cask series. We have 1984, 1985, 1986, and 1988, which is not pictured there. Those are our 30-year plus whiskeys. Those are pretty much the last vestiges of liquid that we have from that we purchased when we had bought the distillery. So when those are gone, they're gone. And the last I checked, there's 6 bottles or 4 bottles in the state. So if you feel like dropping $1,000 on some whiskey, there you go. That's what I recommend. And then we have our peated side on the right. That's Port Charlotte Tenure and Isla Barley 2012, which we got to enjoy today. The OLC, which is what we talked about as our unique casking experimentation within Port Charlotte, and then our Octomore 11 series. Next year's the 12 series, so make sure you pick up the bottles that you want of Octomore now, because again, once they're gone, they're gone. So we have one more video for you.
Happy Burns Night, everyone. My name's Louise, and I'm an ambassador based at Bruichladdich Distillery on the beautiful island of Isla. I thought I would share a little Burns poem with you all, and it's one that I'm sure everyone will know, so please feel free to join in. Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot and auld lang syne? For auld lang syne, my dear, for auld lang syne. We'll tak a cup of kindness yet, for auld lang syne. We twa have paddled in the burn fae morning sun till dine, but seas between us braid hae roared, sin auld lang syne. For auld lang syne, my dear, for auld lang syne. We'll tak a cup of kindness yet, for auld lang syne. And there's a hand, my trusty fear, and gie's a hand o' thine, and we'll take a right good willy wacht, for auld lang syne. For auld lang syne, my dear, for auld lang syne. We'll tak a cup of kindness yet, for auld lang syne.
I figured we'd find one that you guys know yet. So Danielle, I'm going to pass this right back here to you, and I'll jump back on here in a second.
Thank you, Austin. So she just read the poem, and now we're going to hear Auld Lang Syne in through bagpipes, which is once again through Randy. Some fun facts about Auld Lang Syne is it's written by Robert Burns, obviously, but it is one of the most well-known songs and poems across the world. Some of you might recognize it as the song that is played as ball drops on New Year's. That's basically the song that is supposed to ring in the new year. So you'll recognize that. It's also played at funerals and other things as like a goodbye. So that's why they play it at the for the New Year celebration, because it's a goodbye to the current year we're in and a welcome to the new one. So we're going to go ahead and listen to that. This is the way that Burns Night is usually closed out, is with this song. So we will come back and answer some last minute questions and stuff, but let's go ahead and watch the bagpipes.
All right, thank you, Randy. Now, I hope you guys have all stayed around because that means there's one more thing to do after this. For everybody who paid attention, now we get an opportunity for the first person to drop the answer into the chat, and we'll have it in the chat so that we can actually have it in the timeline. So fingers on the keyboard. We ready?
And before you ask the question, make sure you're sending it to everybody and not just sending it directly to one person. Just FYI, so we can all see it.
There you go. Yeah. That way we don't have any excuses. I don't want anybody coming at me going, hey, man, I sent it. All right. Okay. Are you ready? I see a lot of intent faces. I love this. I know I saw a lot of note taking too. So we'll see just how good the notes were. Okay. What was the name, the last name of the brothers who created Bruichladdich Distillery? Tom Brady. Sorry, Don. No, don't see it yet. Go through the notes. Come on, I know you guys know it. Hey, Kathleen! Can we have a winner with Kathleen? There you are. So, Kathleen, Danielle is going to want to make sure that we have all your proper information so that we can reach out to you to make sure that we can get connected with you on that one. All right. Are we ready again?
Hold on, Austin. Someone got kicked out and is rejoining, so give them a second to get back in.
Okay. All right. One. All right. Are we ready for question numero dos? In what year was the first Burns Night hosted? Boom! Kim Young. She knew it. She guessed it, but she knew it. That was so fast. There we go. And again, Kim, make sure that we have your information. Okay. Well, that was fun. That was quick. That was easy. I like that. So now, what questions do you guys have for me on Bruichladdich or as a whole? Any whiskeys that you might have had tonight? Anything that I might have missed in the chat? I just want to make sure that I have everything from you guys that you guys want, and you guys get everything from me that you want. And feel free to unmute and ask it.
I just thought it was a great job. Good time. Had fun. Very educational. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Anybody not have a good time? So I know who to kick. Just kidding.
To be honest, this is really the greatest experience ever. And honestly, I really thank you guys for introducing me to this amazing distillery. And I really am thankful. So, and to be honest, maybe in the near future, I can afford a bottle of good Glen Harvey. I mean, it's really amazing. Thank you guys so much for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Okay.
Thank you. This was awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm going to launch a quick poll. I just kind of want to see what your guys' favorite whiskey of the night was. This is more for just my own curiosity. But this is anonymous, so I'm not going to be like, wow, I'm going to text you and tell you were wrong. And this will kind of give anybody a thought to ask any other questions that they might have. Catriona, I got my job because I have about a decade in restaurants, and then I sold beer for a few years before this. And then I got super, super lucky, and somebody picked my resume up out of a pile when I applied for Remy. So it's a long labor of love of service industry that has finally kind of come to fruition for something that now I get paid to drink, and it's kind of the dream. It's kind of, I was Googling when I got into beer. I said, you know, who pays you to drink? And they said, hey, we'll pay you to drink. And I said, okay, I'm good. You're not really going to get any bottle aging on whiskey, Aaron. All of your aging is going to come from oak. So once it's in glass, it stops aging in the way that you're thinking of. So it's not really going to change flavors because of more access to oak or anything like that. So, but can you stick it in a bottle after it's been opened, or can you open a bottle and kind of stick it in your basement for a little while, as long as you're storing it the right way where the cork isn't drying out and everything? I've got some bottles that have been down there for a while. Okay, so James, if you make your way out to Bruichladdich, they give some of the best tours because, again, everything is so hands-on. All of the individuals that we saw on the videos tonight are actually part of like the experiential crew that we have at Bruichladdich, and some of those are actually going to be people that are your actual tour guides. They are extremely knowledgeable, so passionate, and will have some of the like inside things that you know, some insider hints, tips, and tricks that I'm not privy to because I'm not there every day. But I would highly recommend the distillery tour. Make sure you're on the, check out on the website. Make sure that they are actually doing it when you do go. They typically are, but again, we're in a weird year. So just kind of cover your bases. So it looks like we had a almost even split, just as for everybody who voted, between the Port Charlotte Tenure and the Port Charlotte Isla Barley. So I like it. Only one person's favorite was the Classic Lottie, and I'm surprised. But we apparently had a lot of peat nuts on the call here, so yeah, I like it. Don, the last time I went out there, I didn't get a chance to go golfing. So I know I looked up St. Andrews because I was like, oh, I'm going to go. And I think it was telling me it was going to be $500 for a round of golf. And that was before I paid for to rent clubs and everything. So I was like, oh, okay. I think I'd rather buy 50 shots of whiskey. So I like golf, but I ain't that good. So Jesse actually mentioned the metal boxes or the metal tins that they come in. That's actually a unique thing that you bring up. So part of our Going Green initiative that Bruichladdich is real big on is we're actually kind of working on a way to maybe get rid of those tins. That's a very traditional packaging as a way to kind of class up your bottle that you're putting out there. But it also creates a lot of waste, and we're aware of that, and we're trying to figure out ways that we can cut waste and give more back to the environment than we take, kind of thing. And so right now we're testing a thing online where it's you can choose to buy it without the tin or with, but if you buy it without the tin, each tin costs us about a pound, so a Great British pound to make. So we'll donate that to a charity instead, or some sort of environmental agency as a way. So if you forego the we're going to make a donation for that in that case. So it's mostly been marketing for generation, but we're working on ending that. Let's see here. Yeah, if you go to Isla, definitely hire a driver, and I will warn you, they drive big American cars like Suburbans on roads that are meant for like tiny European cars. So they will fly by each other on the wrong side of the road at like 80 miles an hour. And you are gripping onto your seat for dear life. And they're like, you're fine. And you're like, yeah, okay, I don't feel that way, though. I need more whiskey. So I think that's part of their shtick, is they get you to drink more whiskey so that you don't feel so afraid in the car. Okay, let me make sure I haven't missed anything. My favorite Bruichladdich is Octomore. I'm spoiled. I get access to Octomore that the average individual doesn't. And so the 0.3 varietals of Octomore tend to be my go-tos. I try not to do it every day. I try to make it like a special occasion type thing. My everyday is probably going to be more of a Port Charlotte Tenure. But when I'm feeling a little spoiled and a little bougie, I'm going to pull out that. Does anybody have any other questions? Did everybody just love it and everybody's feeling great? I'm feeling pretty good. Oh, and somebody just brought up the documentary. So there is Scotch, A Golden Dream. It is on Amazon Prime. That is all about Jim Mckeon. It will give you some beautiful visuals, some beautiful background into the distillery, Jim Mckeon as a person. He has a lot of people that he has impacted throughout the course of his time creating whiskey, and they all have just amazing things to say about him. So if you have Amazon Prime and you want to look it up, it's called Scotch, A Golden Dream. Keep an eye out for something else coming up, just a little wink, wink, nudge, nudge. There is something else coming out from that concerns Bruichladdich and Jim Mckeon, so I would keep that in mind as well. Dan, yes, Black Art is unpeated. Steve, yeah, a lot of my day is spent in bars and liquor stores. So pre-COVID, clearly now a lot of my day is spent on a computer screen talking to people. But a lot of what I would do before is just go in and talk to the individuals who are in charge of bringing stuff in and figure out, how do I set up tastings? How do I set up, menus and all that kind of fun stuff. So it's just a lot of shaking hands and drinking. Excellent. Well, if nobody else has any questions, thank you guys so much. I'm really sorry if I missed anything. If you guys really have a really burning question that I didn't get to, feel free to drop an email. I will go ahead and drop my email in here. Go ahead and shoot me an email. I will be happy to answer. And if I don't know an answer, I will come up with one for you. Katrina, we are working on a way for you to get notified. I will tell you, if you send me an email of the things that you're kind of interested in outside of HRCA. So we do a ton with HRCA, and HRCA has this amazing mailing list. It's always good to keep an eye on what they're doing and what Davidson's is doing specifically. But beyond that, if you send me an email, I will try to add you to a list so that we can keep you in the loop. But we're trying to come up with an easier way to do that as well. Otherwise, thank you, HRCA. Thank you, Davidson's. Thank you, Randy, our amazing bagpiper tonight. I dropped the email in there, Patrick. It's just, it's kind of up there a little bit more. But thank you to everybody, all of you who joined us and kind of gave us nice tasting notes and made this a nice, fun, enjoyable evening. And again, make sure you go in and check out Davidson's and all of their amazing whiskey that they have. Just make sure you stick only in that Bruichladdich aisle,
Thank you, Austin. We really appreciate you being here tonight and all of your amazing information about Bruichladdich. Like you said, thank you to Davidson's and thank you to all of you. These virtual events would not happen without you guys supporting us. So thank you for supporting us, and we hope you continue to support these virtual events like this, because while we can't do in person, we really like to bring these to you guys at home. So the more you support us, the more we're able to bring to you. So just keep that in mind. Like usual, I'll send the email with the recording of this. So if you want to go back and relook at it, or if people had to leave early, they can see it. And I'll also send the coupon tomorrow as well, one last time, so that you guys have the coupon. If you guys liked anything tonight that you want to go buy bottles at Davidson's, you can get 10% off. So now's the time to buy it, so you can get that discount for sure. And with that, I will say goodnight and happy Burns Night. Thank you all for joining us on our first ever virtual Burns Night, and hope you all have a great night. Thank you.